This is Paul Schrader. It is September 2002, 1 month before the opening of Autofocus. This credit sequence, the idea was to try to situate the film by creating the images that impacted on Bob Crane, his sort of references in the world of American manhood. And we really didn't have the money to do it correctly. So I asked a friend in the advertising business, and we found a young man in advertising named Ken Ferris, who did this for Sweat Equity. He spent about 3 months doing this, working with me on it. And at the end of it, he got a front credit, which is unusual, which will hopefully, lead to better things for him. And I got to have my credit sequence, on the cheap for $8,000 rather than around $75,000. The song here, we wanted to originally have a song by Sammy Davis, but couldn't afford it. So I said to the composer, Angelo Badalamenti, I said, I know a writer who works cheap. And he said, I know a composer who works cheap. So we did it. And Buster Poindexter, a.k.a. David Johansen, sang it, and we assembled a big band and did it. Although Angelo did reject some of my couplets. He's a good Catholic. The one I like best that he didn't put in, but it's a little backdoor lovin' gets all the priests a shovin'. Okay, here we are at KNX. This is probably the acme of Crane's creative career. He really was an important disc jockey, both commercially and artistically. He was, part of that first wave of DJs who so-called irreverence, created a kind of phenomenon, coughing over cigarette commercials and joking with everybody. The show was primarily jazz and big band because that's where his interests lied.
As you regular listeners know, from time to
Kinnear was also a DJ as a young man in armed service radios. So this came quite naturally to him. And it was one of the attractions of casting him is that he really understood this DJ personality, this DJ mentality. And it was a very good grounding for his bring on the character. And that line that occurs later in the movie where he complains about dead air and every DJ knows, that really came from Greg himself, about the whole phenomenon of dead air. This narration was originally over a scene of Bob Crane's body being discovered, which we cut out because it was just so kind of graphic, and it was the first thing in the movie. It was bookended the film, and it took the audience almost 15 minutes to get back into the right mood after watching Bob's bloody head. And so it was suggested to me maybe I cut it out, and I did. And it really was the right decision. As soon as I saw it, I knew that it had to go. It's probably somewhere else on this DVD. You can track it down under missing or deleted scenes. Ron Liebman is really quite good in this film. He came in and worked for 2 days, and all his scenes were done in that 2-day period. But he really captured the soul and the essence of the 60s William Morris agent. There was a color scheme or a visual scheme employed in this film. It originally came from the production designer James Chinlund, who referred to Crane's life as an accretion of clutter. and it got messier and messier and more video cables. And we took that idea, which originally was meant only for set design, and applied it across the board. Applied it to production design, color, film stock, camera work, hair, makeup, wardrobe, music. And so that the goal was to gradually make a film that at some point the viewer would realize that he or she is now watching a film entirely different from what they were watching an hour ago. And so this is where we begin. We begin with these pop 60s colors, the saturated film, clean lines, and take it from there. This to me almost looks a little too cartoonish. It looks more like an ad for the 50s or 60s than an actual home. But in order to create the shift, we began very kind of bold and bright and uncluttered. Rita Wilson, who plays Bob's first wife, Anne, had actually approached me. She was very, very keen to do this. And just to be honest with you, I think she just wanted to say, fuck her, Bob. But because she kept saying to me, when do I get to do my dirty line? The casting of Kinnear, Greg had been approached before I was involved. And obviously he hadn't committed, without a director involved. And somebody said to me, what do you think of Kinnear for this? And I thought about 5 seconds, and I said, that is a great idea. Here's Greg trying to drum. He's not a natural musician. But Greg had all the natural gifts. He had that glib, ironic sense of humor. He had that down. That whole Crane radio light comic mentality. And that stuff is a lot harder to do than you think. And to have an actor who can do it and who can take you through a story that's going to go progressively darker and remain that kind of blithe, lighthearted man, that's very, very important. And I'd been watching Greg's work over a number of films, and I'd seen him improve as an actor. And I really felt that I could take him out to the deep end of the pool, and that he would be all right, and that he would be able to swim. And he was. Here's a rehearsal for Hogan's Heroes. We did our best to sort of recreate the gang. Kurt Fuller, who played Klimper, Colonel Clank, was absolutely on the nose. And he said to me at one point, he said, well, if you listen to those shows, you realize that Klimper basically sang the role. I did not have a great investment in the show itself. I found it somewhere between being unfunny and offensive. But then I was a college student at the time, and I was involved in the anti-war and the protests and civil rights, and so I'm probably not a particularly good judge of the show. Maybe if I had seen it when I was 6 years old or 11 years old, I would think more of it. But that really wasn't a motivation for me in doing this story, to sort of touch my nostalgic, tender feelings for Hogan's Heroes. We did our best to recreate the show. It was a one-camera, 3-walled set. They would shoot out the 3 walls and then drag the 4th wall in. This is actually dialogue from the opening episode.
Kill, clink. I like that.
The Ocotillo Lounge in Palm Springs looks just as it did when in 1965 CBS had the press party for Hogan's Heroes. The place hasn't changed since. And yes, they did have the Nazis cooking hamburgers. Ed Begley here was not only in some films I'd done before, but he was also one of the kids in Superdad, a film that Crane made for Disney after Hogan's went down. And Ed found it sort of a hoot watching Greg play Bob. The film was very tightly budgeted, $7.5 million, and that came down to 33 shooting days. So we really had to move, constantly. And I've made films long enough now that I've sort of figured out how to get the most bang for the buck, and how to make something look like it cost more than it did. But still, it was difficult at that level. And but there's pros and cons. The cons are it doesn't have much money. It's not much money. The pros is that it's enough. And secondly, it really focuses your mind about what is important. And when you make decisions to do certain things, you have a clear idea why.
They did it for one reason. The affiliates have seen the pilot.
The original script was written by Michael Cherbosi, based on a book on the murder of Bob Crane. And when I got the script, which was much more of a conventional biopic than it became, what drew me in was I saw something underneath there, which was a kind of middle-aged American TV star heterosexual version of a movie I had liked a lot called Prick Up Your Ears, about Joe Orton and his lover Kenneth. And so that dynamic is the one that really perked my ears up, and that's where I came into the room. As I went along and worked on it and wrote and rewrote the script, many other facets of Crane's life and of the story came alive for me. And I came rather quickly to realize that Bob was much like many of my protagonists, and that he was a man who aspired to be one thing, even thought he was one thing, and all the while was acting in a counterproductive behavior, a counterproductive manner. And this, I think, more than any other characteristic, has fascinated me. And one way or another, I find myself dealing with that. And because I think that the greatest fun of an artistic enterprise is the exploration of character and of self-destructive behavior in general. It's a subject that never ceases to fascinate me. How, if we want to be happy, why do we do the things, that make us unhappy? And you can never answer those questions, you just sort of explore them. And if you find a character like Bob Crane, who lives this contradiction large, who comes at you with both headlights bright, then it makes it easier to explore.
Finished number 5. Of the new shows, it was number 1. I've always had an extraordinary amount of luck, being in the right place at the right time.
The mystery of addiction is really a mystery. Obviously, a big displacement is going on. And sort of like the drug addict who says, I used to have a lot of problems, but now I only have one. Any addiction, sexual, is covering up for something. I had some sort of ideas how it might be while making the film, but I never really got to the heart of the mystery, and I was perfectly content to explore it as Bob did on the surface, because he was, in essence, a superficial man, a rather clueless man, And I don't think there were any real dark nights of the soul for him. So it became a real challenge to try to get the audience to identify and empathize with a character who did not have much of an interior life. That probably is the more original of the things that I did in the film. In this scene, Willem Dafoe, a friend and an actor I've worked with before, is coming on as John Carpenter and doing his absolutely delicious, needy act. Some people have hired Willem and like Willem, to be big and bombastic and overexpressive. I've always liked him more on the quiet side. I like him when he's desperate and when he's lonely and when he's needy. I think that he has all kinds of colors at that point.
Shoot, gotta run. Nice meeting you.
All right.
Carpenter. FBI.
There's a sort of the Lone Ranger and Tonto here. That sort of just crept up on it. I had the idea to have him interview Clayton Moore at the beginning, and then John Carpenter is half Indian, and later on they refer to themselves as Lone Ranger and Tonto, and the idea of the masked man and his half Indian sidekick is one of those little nuggets that is squirreled away in the text of the film that only a handful of people get, and only a handful of people should get. What you just saw there was an entirely manufactured CGI shot. That place does not exist. That's a paint box creation. At one point when we started running out of shooting days, I simply stopped shooting night exteriors because they're quite expensive to shoot. And so toward the back of the film, there are no more night exteriors, that I think was a creative decision. Where we really needed night exteriors, Salome's and later in Classic Cat, we created them on the computer, which, I guess is the state of filmmaking today. It is cheaper to create a night exterior on a computer than to go out and shoot one. Not as much as is known about John Carpenter, obviously. He was a techie, he was bisexual. I think it's that classic situation of someone who lives off from a semi-celebrity, and in his life there were a number of semi-celebrities, and also enables those same celebrities. And part of his whole entree into the world of easy women was, through these celebrity contacts.
Yeah, sure, thanks, okay. My name's Nicky D. I'm the drummer. You're on that show too, aren't you?
Michael Rogers here, who's playing the young Richard Dawson, is Scottish. When he first came in to read, he did the whole thing in a brogue. And I said, what's going on here? Well, he had never seen the show before. He had no idea what accent Dawson used. So I had to send him, out and have him come back in a few days after watching a few episodes. So he switched it over to Cockney. Crane was a drummer and really aspired to have a career in that field. Wasn't as good as the people who he worshipped. But he did play these gigs, and, Greg took lessons and tried very hard to do the best he could at drumming. But like in this shot right here, we sort of had to choose between him having fun and having good drumming. And I said, look, I'm just going to come above the waist and you just have a good time because, you're too concerned about whether you look like a drummer or not. This scene was in the original script, although it was in a confessional, so maybe that's a pretty good point of departure. the idea of Bob in a confessional just seemed so wrong to me. So, but I like the idea of him trying to explain himself to a member of the clergy. So I put it at a coffee shop where the priest says, wouldn't you be more comfortable in the confessional? And the thinking here being that he really doesn't want to talk to this guy, but his wife has sort of twisted his arm, and now he's got to do it. And then kind of deliciously off-kilter thing where the priest suggests that they play together, which from my church background is something I remember, that they would always throw you by offering to do something that you didn't think they would do. Now, you can see we're still in the bright color mode here, in the chartreuse and the orange and the lemon sweater. These colors are going to start fading before too long. But this is very much the pop world.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
This film does have a bit more of a character arc for Bob than I suspect he actually had. The Gerbosi script had a huge character arc for him, which I didn't think was true. I don't think Hollywood makes good people go bad. I think bad people come to Hollywood in order to be bad. And so the idea of good Bob going bad because of Hollywood, that never struck me as true for a second. There still is a little more of a character arc in this piece than I think even existed in his real life. And that is for a couple of reasons. One is that Greg was very, very committed to it. And it was hard for me to take it out against his wishes. And the other was that the audience, it makes the audience feel somewhat secure knowing there's a character arc. Here's a classic cat. No longer exists. All CGI. All in the paint box. I'll get back to that subject. Here are the Porcelain Twins, who in real life do a kind of S&M sort of act, but we worked out this 60s nightclub act. And yes, they are twins, and yes, they do speak at the same time, synchronously. This is very, very unnerving. Heather and Amber, if you're out there, I remember you, and I remember trying to listen to you talk at the same time all the time. Getting back to Mr. Crane's so-called arc, I think that what changed in his life was probably lifting the veil of hypocrisy more than anything else. When he was at KNX and on the show, he really promoted that Hollywood image, the good father, did those photo play spreads, really wanted everyone to believe that he was the good Christian family man. But in fact, he was already, a porn freak at that time. I think what happened when the first marriage went down and then the show went down, I think that the level of hypocrisy also finally went down, and he allowed himself to become more of the person he always was.
Talking about maybe going and grabbing a bite to eat over at Arthur J's.
No. Let's go to my pad.
I just jumped over a kind of delicious moment when I love it when Willem comes in here and says, Bob, you were great. Willem is so good at doing just that. Now the colors are starting to. Now we're in Carpenter's fuck pad and starting to bring the colors down a little bit in this set.
I've never seen anything like this.
Of course not. That's the point. It's a prototype.
We had to cast a lot of sort of one-night stands in this film, day players. And particularly if there's nudity involved and not much dialogue, it's not a very attractive job for an actress. So a number of these roles, now the girl, Alex, on the left, she is a bona fide actress. She's from a TV show, Everybody Loves Raymond. The other girl who plays Elaine, is more from that Playboy at Night world. And we had a number of actresses who sort of worked in that middle ground between porn and legit actors. You know, they did a kind of softcore cheesecake sort of stuff. That's in Los Angeles. There are many articulated strata of girls who do nudity to some degree, and they each have their own areas of representation. Like Miss Townsend here, obviously we wanted her to do this shot, so that put her into a certain category. That certain actresses wouldn't want to do it. Alex here is really terrific. I find this in some way maybe the sexiest scene in the movie, just because it's the most articulated female sexuality in the film, and she was sort of straight-laced. She's a Mexican girl, and she was going to do the dancing at the Classic Cat until her agent found out about it and put the kibosh on that idea.
Oh, can you crack me up?
No, it's...
No, well, I'm not Colonel Klink or that other doom.
James Chinlin was a production designer that had been recommended to me. He had done Requiem for a Dream, which I thought was quite good. And he was very young, and I wanted to get someone outside of Bob's generation. I didn't want to lock this all into people my age. And also, James was hungry and willing to work cheap, which in, the world of my films is a pretty important characteristic. And so I brought him out to Los Angeles, and James, as I said earlier, did come up with this idea of the gradually cluttered world. And modulated all these sets and working the color schemes and so forth.
Herr Kommandant, Colonel Hogan to see you.
The second season, Cynthia Lynn, who played Helga, was replaced by Patty Olsen, screen name Sigrid Valdis. The character's name was Hilda.
Herr Kommandant, Colonel Hogan to see you.
Commandant, you wanted to see me?
Yes, Hogan, I have a very serious matter to discuss with you. I know everything that happened last night.
You do?
Hogan, you don't fool me for one moment.
Well, I know that, sir. Cigar?
This little cigar bit that Greg does was unscripted, and I hadn't even thought about it, and I realized we needed a little bit of business here for Hogan. And I said to Greg, what shall we do? And he thought for a second. He said, well, why don't you do the cigar bit? He obviously had been watching the show and studying the character of Hogan much more than I had, so that whenever we needed a little bit of shtick, I could just turn to him and he would come up with it, and I didn't have to worry about having to do it myself. Bob managed to keep his womanizing relatively undercover while he was on the show. People on the set knew, but it wasn't knowledge outside, and it certainly wasn't the kind of thing you talked about back then. The only reason people really started finding out about Crane's behavior inside the industry is that he started telling them. He started showing his books around and showing his tapes around, and he lost that sort of perspective that he had while the show was going on and while his first marriage was in place, and where he and he got to the point where he couldn't really see why his behavior was such a problem for others, which is an interesting phenomenon. Somebody who has spent so many years creating a career for themselves out of nothing and is such a workaholic, then they come to a point in their life where they're undermining everything they've accomplished because of a private, personal obsession, and they can't stop. well, that certainly puts that character right in my wheelhouse. I'm crazy about that character all day, every day.
Okay.
Bob Crane had made a career out of being likable. He was the likable guy, and he was the charmer and the glib, funny guy. And he took those skills, which he had honed in radio, and turned them to his advantage as a comic actor, in TV and in movies. And when someone is that personable and attractive and semi-famous, we really tend to let them get away with murder. Not in this case with murder, but you tend to forgive him almost everything, and the whole substructure. We all become enablers for this kind of person. Now, there's a scene coming up now where we had a little bit of a ratings problem. And I think, was probably somewhat clueless because I thought I was shooting an R-rated movie, and maybe I sort of based it on watching things like 6 Feet Under. But I found out that 6 Feet Under is not an R-rated show. You couldn't put it in the theater. It would be NC-17. And in fact, I was shooting stuff that wasn't R-rated. And one of those shots is this simulated oral sex that's coming up. And I had to decide whether to cut the shot or to somehow obscure it. I decided to pixelate the offending section, which I believe you will see right here, yes. Some people said you should just cut it out rather than pixelated it, but I wanted the viewer to know that, yes, Bob was shooting hardcore. It wasn't cheesecake. It was up close and explicit, and we can't show it to you. Oh, by the way, this is the real camera. We found an unused, brand new Vidicom camera. And this is exactly the camera that Crane used, and it's the one we used to shoot those black and white video scenes that were just shown on the TV set. We used the actual camera. Some people try to tell you that, don't worry, we can fix that digitally, and we can, degrade it and make. That's not true. This is the camera, and here it is. And it has all that phasing and that blurry, tacky image. It actually has a tube in it, and so that using the real camera had a couple of advantages. One, that it was authentic. We didn't have to pay to degrade it. But two, that the sexual activity was all the more obscured just because of the low quality of the black and white image. The Crane house here is out in the valley, where the Cranes lived. I love this location because you always had that pool in the background, and that you could shoot interiors, and see the pool. You could shoot the dining room, shoot the bedroom, shoot the living room, and have the pool in the background. This is a classic old Hollywood hideaway. It's now actually a Korean restaurant. They changed the food, but not the decor. And Maria Bello plays Patty, who is Crane's second wife and also the second Klink secretary on Hogan's. Her screen name was Sigrid Valdez, although she was American.
Cheers to that. Tired of being a housewife,
So you came back here where you can play one instead?
Something like that. What about you, Hogan? What are your dreams?
Maria was very, very keen to do this, although she has sort of normal dimensions. The real Patricia Crane was very, very well endowed above the waist, and And so in a scene like this, we build Maria up like crazy. Bob did like women big-breasted. The bigger the better. And when you look at some of his home porn, there's certainly a preference for large-breasted women, even if they're not particularly attractive. And I used that preference later in the film in casting some of his playmates. This is Robert Crane Jr. This is his oldest son by his first marriage. He also goes under the name Bobby, and someone playing him has already occurred as the young boy and will occur as another actor when he's in his 20s.
15, actually.
15 years. How do you do it? What's your secret?
3 words. Don't make waves. As every sailor knows, when one set of waves...
Bobby was also a technical advisor to the film, and not only spent a good amount of time discussing his father with Greg, but also lent us the Hogan's jacket, because the Hogan's jacket that Greg wears in the film is the real jacket that Bob Crane used on the show, and Bobby here ended up with that jacket. And here again is that pool location, that house in Van Nuys, that you have the delightful interior-exterior thing working. It was actually a kind of a hard location to get to technically, but we really loved it because it took the curse off interiors, because you could always show the pool, when you were inside the bedroom. But Crane's jacket, which used to be Frank Sinatra's jacket on Ben Ryan's Express, fit Greg perfectly. We didn't even take it in, and so I guess Crane and Kinnear, must have been the same chest size.
His work sapped all your energy.
There were some references in the earlier script to Bob and wanting his wife to make love with the lights on. I cut that out. I just felt that was part of the original kind of schematic thing of Good Bob and all of that. It was all too simplistic. So in the editing phase, I got rid of that. So here we have Oscar and Felix back at the porn pad watching their movies. And this idea of the what's that on my butt actually was in Michael's script. I liked it. I think it's the only one of the Crane Carpenter scenes that's in the movie that was in the original script. And it is a little bit of an exaggeration, of course, but it is good, clean, nasty fun. And the Carpenter was into the swing scene and into group sex and into bi scenes. So it seemed like a perfectly natural and sort of humorous way to start to draw both the distinctions and the affinity of these two men. Because the moment Crane says one thing, in some way he's also saying the opposite. And so that when the lady starts to protest too much here, you start to get a sense of the inner dynamic of these kind of male-male relations, which brings to mind a quote I've been using from my friend Susanna Moore, the novelist. And she said to me, after seeing the movie, she said, whenever there's more than one penis in the room, any sexual act is a homosexual act. And I found her description particularly apt for the kind of thing I want to do. Here's Michael McKean, an old friend I've also used before.
Thank you all for coming. Ever since the introduction of the CV-2000, we've been working toward the development of a color videotape recorder. Mr. John Carpenter, our Los Angeles representative, has set up a demonstration. This system will demonstrate.
I felt the film needed a scene on John Carpenter without Bob Crane. He needed to be established as a freestanding, independent, worthy character. And you had to feel that it was more than one character study. It was two character studies, and unless you give him his own scenes, you can't do that. So I wrote 3 scenes for Willem without Bob.
John, lights.
And in fact, I give him the most important scene, which is the final dialogue scene, and I allow him to kind of wrap up the show.
Thank you. Thanks. What's happened?
I don't know. I said everything according to specs.
Well, fix it.
Looks fine to me.
It's green.
Okay.
It's fucking green. You really can't tell, can you? You're fucking colorblind.
I'll fix it.
God damn you, John. I've got execs from Tokyo, every network, and you pull a stunt like this? John, leave.
I'm fired?
Yeah, get out.
You can't do that.
It's done.
I've got the contacts.
After John was released by Sony, he worked for Akai, but all his jobs were in some way in a kind of freelance way. You know, he essentially was hired to sort of hobnob with celebrities and try to place their product, place with these celebrities, and he did some repair work, and he was sort of everybody's pal that way. He had a whole circle of friends who he supplied video equipment to. They're mentioned in the film, Tommy Smothers and Dick Martin and Richard Dawson. And strangely enough, Jay Silverheels, Tonto himself, was one of Carpenter's video clients. In the scene we just saw where the video goes squirrely, the audience often thinks, Bob's porn is going to end up in the room. I suppose that would have been a good scene, but I needed to get the boys back together. And so the scene was about the video breaking down and not about mixing up family and porn. Because, in fact, Crane did do that, particularly later in life. He would record everything right on the same tape. So you would get parts of TV shows, you would get home movies, and you would get explicit porn all on the same tape. Because at that point in his life, it was all the same to him, more or less anyway. Here's a nice close-up of an old reel-to-reel VTR. There is in this film, as well as a history of a certain kind of American clueless male, there's also a history of video technology. And we go through the machinery, and every time you seem to run into Carpenter, he's got a new gadget. And someone once told me, he said the truest thing about this movie is that the attraction for men isn't the women, it's the gadgets. I don't know if that person was right, but certainly Carpenter embraced the male sex object gadget axis. It was fun putting Greg and Willem together because they're quite different cats. Greg's an essential West Coaster and Willem's an East Coaster, even though they're both from the Midwest. But I did like that Oscar and Felix aspect of it. I thought they were a very odd combo, and they would look interesting together. Plus, they both looked like they were real-life prototypes. And of course, there was some anxiety at the beginning whether they would hit it off. But fortunately for me, they became quite good friends and really were able to work off each other as actors. Now we're in a party in the hills. As a young grad student at UCLA, I actually went to one of these parties once. But getting back to Greg and Willem, I think that I hired one of the reasons I wanted Willem for Greg is Willem is very comfortable in these difficult situations, both in terms of difficult characters and explicit sex. And Greg was not. Greg was very, very uneasy and very anxious about going into this area. So it was very good for me to have an actor who was not only a true soldier, but it was my soldier who I had been to battle with before, so that I could use him to flank up Greg whenever he started getting too concerned about the nature of what we were doing. And Willem could assure him that don't worry, we're on track. This is how you do this kind of movie.
No, that's good. I like that. Here we go.
This girl right here, I was going to use more of, and I cast her, and then she showed up, and then she took off her top, and she had breathwork done 10 days before without telling anybody. And she lifts her shirt, and we're all standing there behind the camera going, what? And she's a very pretty girl. I don't know why she felt the need to do that, and then not to tell anybody she was going to do it either.
I love breasts. Any kind. I love them.
This breath montage is intentionally kind of cartoony. You wanted to get into Bob's fascinations and his obsessions, but you didn't want to do it in a deep think way. And this really sets the tone for the kind of superficiality of his sexual obsessions, which was a choice that that we made, and using Girl Watcher plays right into that. It's the first clear indication in the film that we're not going to go deep into the waters of sexual obsession, that we have a slightly different goal. I'm not sure whether I would have been the right director to make that film anyway. I don't know how comfortable I would have been making a film that was really down and dirty and painful and explicit when it came to sexuality. I suppose I could if I had the right script, but I don't think I am naturally drawn to make that movie. I did like this movie, which I considered to be a slightly different one, and some people have accused me of not making the movie I didn't want to make, or being afraid to make the movie I didn't want to make. But I don't think I would have made that movie. I don't think I could have made Leaving Las Vegas. I don't know how comfortable. I like these situations a little more coded, and a little more obscure, not quite so in your face. Of course, I can say that today and then act differently tomorrow. One of the attractions that this second marriage had was, what this scene is about, is that he was, she had a much more open attitude toward sex. I think her quote was, she said, Bob didn't give up his First Amendments when he married me, his First Amendment rights when he married me. I mean, I don't remember adultery being in the First Amendment, but that was how she phrased it. This little scene here, another freestanding scene for Willem, to sort of let him exist and to show the kind of tension between Dawson and Crane. At one point I cut this out just because it wasn't that necessary. And what I realized when I cut it out was that the scene following, the kind of Hogan's fantasy scene, didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because it came right after you cut into the stage, and it was too much too quick. Whereas having this scene, the audience is sort of watching it, and they know it's not that important, and they know we must be here at this location for another reason, because we can't be here just for this quasi-consequential scene. so that by using this scene, you not only get a little character work done for Carpenter and help set him up a little bit more, you also set up the gag so that when the Hogan's Fantasy hits, you're ready for it because you've been waiting for something to happen. The fantasy sequence was in the Gerbosi script, and it was the thing I liked most about that script. I thought it was terrific and absolutely inspired. And again, a way to try to get into Bob's dilemma without getting heavy. You know, you have, again, a kind of superficial, clueless guy, and he's caught between two marriages, and how do you portray this? Well, you sort of portray it as a fantasy on the show, and using this old-fashioned gimmick like this twirling wheel, in which the CGI people wanted to do something really fancy with his face turning around. And I said, no, you know, do it like they used to. You know, just get a piece of cardboard, draw a spiral on it. So we do a number of things to get into the fantasy. First thing we do is we shoot straight up in the air and flip the lights over to green, play around with the music. Originally, I had shot that, so I kept going up in the air to emulate similar shots I had done in Mishima and Patty Hearst, and so that the entire set shrunk in limbo in a field of black. But it turned out to be too precious and too contrived, and it was just too much an expression of the filmmaker and not enough of the character. And so I ended the rise up just at the point where they are exiting the set. Now, in constructing a sequence like this, you have to keep ratcheting it up. And so the music escalates, the action escalates. Now we're in sort of the third section of it. It breaks down to 4 sections where she can come in. And now she talks about a modern marriage. When we shot it, she said open marriage, but the Sony legal department said that might get me in trouble with her lawsuit to which she was planning. So we looped in the word modern, which the distinction was sort of lost on me, but they felt that legally they were better off with modern than open.
Go ahead. Fuck her, Bob.
This is a good time to talk about Julie Wise, a costume designer. That fabulous outfit that Willem was wearing. She had done another film for me, Touch, and I really thought that she's really a one-of-a-kind costume designer because she comes up with all this weird wardrobe, but it keeps changing. So, you'll have something planned and for that day, and then the actor will walk on set and they'll be wearing something else. And you'd say, Julie, I thought so-and-so was going to be wearing this or that today. And she said, yeah, but I came in this morning and I looked at them and I thought they would be better in this. Well, that causes some filmmakers considerable consternation. But I like Julie, and I kind of like the way she works. And if, you get into fights with her over this kind of stuff because you don't have a choice. But it's always nice to have people around you who really are creative and who will, kind of extend themselves to do something in a different way, even if it means they get yelled at.
Ann? Oh.
One of the things I realized as I got into this story that we were covering a very interesting period in American cultural history, 1965 to 78, and where the idea of American manhood was somewhat in flux. And so that was a kind of added thematic perk. To have these kind of rat pack mentality guys, like the guys depicted in the credits, who are intent on chasing women, and then they have to then the psychedelic era comes and the hippies show up, so they have to trade in their blazers for beads and bell bottoms in order to keep scoring women, but they're still the same sexist clowns they were all along. And, that to me was kind of fun and sort of seeing that shift. So that in the course of the movie, you do get a change, and music is always the way one earmarks such change. So it's jazz and rock and roll and Motown and psychedelic and disco. And, Crane kind of cruises on through these periods, changing his style and becoming less and, more and more uninhibited. But he doesn't, it's almost as if the culture changes around him, and he doesn't. So many things that might scare off another filmmaker just so attracted me to this. The fact that you had a character who didn't create a lot of empathy and a character who didn't get it. I just found that was a great character to work with. I've had that before in my life. On Patty Hearst, it was a case that nobody wanted, they couldn't get anybody to direct a movie where the main character is in a closet for the first half. And I thought, wow, in the closet for the first half, the whole world is as she imagines it. I can do anything. And the same thing with a movie called Comfort of Strangers that people didn't quite know how to make. So I've never had that much of a problem about material that hasn't been done before. I think it's cool.
Film rolls.
Bobby Darin.
Huh?
Bobby Darin gets film roles.
Well, he's married to Sandra Dee. You'd have to audition.
Whatever it takes. Just want to leave Hogan in the leather jacket behind me for once and for all,
According to the Washington Post, while still in office as Attorney General, John Mitchell had personally controlled a secret Republican fund. Mitchell vehemently denied any such involvement and called the story ludicrous. Vice President Agnew, meanwhile...
Bob, you are not a failure.
This mortgage is eating me alive. I'm drowning in debt. I've never gone this long ever without work before. I'll get that. Hello? Yeah. Yeah, no, I just got held up. Great.
It's John, isn't it?
Referring to all the techie stuff, the autofocus lens in and of itself did not exist during this time frame. And the title, which is Jabosi's title, it's a very good title, refers to self-involved. It's selfish. And in the same way as autoeroticism, for example.
Get out.
So the times they are changing. Miss Kitty now, totally nude. This watch that Carpy comes up with, Mark Dawson, who is Richard Dawson's son, Mark told me that Carpenter had this watch. In one of those strange bits of Hollywood history, Richard Dawson's son became Carpenter's great defender when when Carpenter was brought up before trial for Bob's murder, and he was with Carpenter all through the trial and remained his friend till his death, and now has a website devoted to proving John innocent. So it is sort of interesting, all these little bizarre hookups.
You've been bad.
Yes, I have.
I know what to do with boys like you.
Now, this whole issue of S&M, I did know that anyone who is in the scene, who's in the swing scene, runs across people who are into domination. And I wanted to, in this scene, indicate the true depths to which this kind of fascination goes. Is that when what domination is truly about is not about wearing funny outfits and having your picture taken. It's about mixing eros and fear. And so I did this scene where he's talking to the dominatrix, and he explains to Carpenter the kind of buzz that happens when eros meets fear, and that, what it's like to have an orgasm when your heart is pounding because you're frightened. And I put this in here so it'd just be some sense, even though I wasn't going to really delve in those waters, just a little sense of how deep they potentially were. Carpenter was and remains the best fit for the murder. He had motive, means, opportunity. The Scottsdale police certainly felt he was, and they brought him up for trial, but there wasn't much evidence. And the jury was out, all of 20 minutes. And if I was on that jury, I would have had to acquit as well. But in terms of the real-life events, nobody was ever quite as good a suspect as Carpenter, even though there were a number of theories about jealous husbands and contracted hits by jealous husbands or angry husbands. But still, when you put all the evidence on the table, Carpenter was the best fit that way, and certainly he was the best fit dramatically. It wouldn't be nearly as interesting a story from a storyteller point of view to have an anonymous hitman employed by a mobbed-up Scottsdale husband to kill Bob Crane.
Just keep trying.
The epitome of the William Morris agent from the 60s. And that was the third of Ron's 5 scenes. Ron sort of perfectly, he's right there at the beginning. He's in an extremely important scene right at the end. He is, of course, a composite character. There was no continuous agent. And particularly toward the end of Crane's life, he was being handled by all kinds of junior agents. But you needed one continuity kind of character for the stretch of his life, one person who was there from the beginning of the show to the end. And so all agents became one in the way that often happens in biopics. And so that his agent Lenny was able to sort of represent his position, evolving position in the film industry over this 14 years.
Working the crowd.
You'll be home in 3 weeks, right?
Unless they boo us off.
They love you, Bob.
I can't say I ever went to dinner theater. I didn't as a kid because I didn't go to theater, and when I got a little older, the idea seemed so thoroughly kind of tacky. It's gone its way now. But occasionally I run into people who saw Bob in dinner theater, and I also occasionally run into people. I just did 3 days ago about a woman who he had come on to within, meeting her for 5 minutes.
Hey, Big Daddy. Voila.
What is that?
Video cassette. It's brand new.
Crane and Carpenter had a song made. We found this song in Diana Carpenter's garage. They actually had this song made, and it was called their car tape, and they would play it when they were in chicks to get them in the mood. And I was going to use this song right here, but it is such a tacky song, and it was like a kind of salsa disco beat, and it was just so sleazy that when people saw it with the movie, they just assumed that I was really trying to make fun of Bob and really taking a real cheap shot at him. So rather than use the song he actually did, I used this old Dave Bartholomew song called Real Gone Lover because I thought it really captured his mentality, you know. I'm a real gone lover, I'm hip and I'm in the know. Come over to my pad and play. We went down to Dallas and had the group Reverend Horton Heat record this. Jim Heath, who's the singer for Horton Heath, is a kind of a Texas psychobilly singer. And they went back and did it in the style of old stride piano. Actually, it was recorded by Van Morrison and Linda Gale Lewis, but I couldn't get the rights to that song because they were in a court case. So Reverend Horton Heat sort of did it in the style of Van Morrison and Linda Gale Lewis. This shot right here, I got the idea of that shot because there was in Bob's Home Porn, there was a similar overhead shot, and I realized looking at the shot that someone else was holding the camera. I said, well, if somebody else is holding the camera, who do you think it might be? I said, well, could it be Carpy? And so I did that shot. I call it my sort of menage a video. And here's one of the full-figured gals that I was speaking of earlier to sort of, show Bob's sort of democratic interest in all types of women. In fact, I remember the day that we shot that, and because Greg had been concerned that the girls were all going to be too good looking, and he wanted not to fall into that trap. And we went in the trailer, and these women were there getting made up. And he said, well, "Who are these girls?" And I said, "Well, they're going to be in the Blind Man's Bluff scene." And he said, "Oh my God!" And I said, "Greg, I distinctly remember the word skank coming out of your mouth." And but in fact, I think he was more liberated and more at ease doing that scene than almost any of the others because, it was just kind of the right thing to do, and he went with it.
A big budget sex film.
Here they're talking about their big budget movie, which apparently was another one of Crane's sort of fantasies. We had to get Paula Stevens' permission to use her name.
Oh yeah, if you pay her enough, she's an actress.
Wow. You could charge like $10 for something like that.
Hey, look at this. Look at my dick. Look at my dick.
I've seen your dick before.
Look closer.
I don't want to look closer.
Look, damn it. See anything different?
What am I supposed to say? It's bigger?
Or is it?
How?
You did it, didn't you? Last time I was in L.A. Penile enhancement.
Wow. It's thicker. How much did it cost?
Yeah. You're going to be in the movies.
Looks great.
Got to do what you got to do.
Looks great.
Hey, a day without sex
is a day wasted.
Well, we've moved down the road considerably in the style. The colors have turned really quite icky, and this really icky green and brown that you're going to see more and more of. The handheld camera work began in the first scene at home with Patty when he's going out to the club. That was the introduction of handheld. That was also the introduction of these green tones. And we have also moved into a different film stock. The colors are getting blown out. You're not holding the exterior values the way you would earlier. The cameras, this phase of camera work was handheld, amateur handheld, pretending not to be. Eventually, we got to the point where we were using what they call shaky cam, which is a very intentionally disruptive handheld camera. Now we're back to a steady cam, which we're using in this case as a kind of not quite good steady cam. This is also the first scene with the Plumpers. And it's a little obvious, But it began here. The plumpers are these things you put in your cheeks to make you a little more jolly. Also, there's a piece of hair that's been now taken out of Greg's hairline that was added to give him a more youthful hairline. And so that was removed at this point. The plumpers were put in, and he has a little extra weight on, but doesn't have a full weight suit on yet. This was a true story going around where he said, that did you show your pictures to Donna Reed? I don't know if he ever did, but once people start telling those stories about you, they just grow exponentially. But Lenny's evolving role here, Ron Liebman's, is trying to be the person who speaks for those who are trying to tell Bob what's going on in his life. Here's the Lone Ranger and Tonto coming to the swing scene. This was actually a mixture of two different swing groups that we had invited by, and actually after finishing shooting that day, they headed off for a party together. So been playing a matchmaker here. Now this is going to be a clip from Superdad, a movie that Disney made, and looking every bit as tacky as the original production. Greg says that by the end of shooting, he finally got through the movie. He said he had it in his trailer, and every day he watched as much as he could, and by the end of the film, he had actually watched the entire thing. In the original script, in my script, it was just that way. We wanted to get two bored kids, but then these kids came, and they were, I don't know what it was, but they were really kind of peculiar and kind of out of it, and so it ended up kind of de facto as Stone Kids.
You think dinner theater makes me happy? How do you think it makes me feel having to do
So this green, Jim Chinlund, the production designer, had a real strong feeling about this green, and wanted to, make that the next stage. It goes into the greens, and then it goes into the browns, and then it goes completely bleached out. The score by Angelo Badalamenti also, adheres to this kind of arc of degradation. It begins with a big band sound and goes into various jazz cues. But right about this time, you're starting to move into that synth territory that many people associate with Angelo because of his work with David Lynch. And these modulations and the moving around of kind of eerie and foreboding sounds. This is another issue of whether or not Bob filmed people against their knowledge. The Scottsdale police seem to think he did. But again, Scotty is very offended by that. But it was in the Scottsdale police report. This scene coming up is really my favorite scene, and also I think the funniest scene in the film. And it just, to me, is a hoot and speaks volumes about a certain type of American man. And when we were shooting it in the basement, and by the way, the Cranes had that photo, but it was in their bedroom. The painting, actually. When we were shooting this scene in the basement, I just had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. I just thought this was like the funniest thing I'd ever seen. These two guys, who can't figure out what it is about women. What is it about women, Carp? As they're jerking off to their own porn. I sort of, particularly the final shot of this sequence, when the camera comes behind them and then just holds in a tableau. I referred to that as my Norman Rockwell shot. And in fact, I did the same kind of Norman Rockwell shot in Affliction. Only in that case, it's where I back off, and from behind, I'm watching Jim Coburn and Nick Nolte as they watch television, and they're watching wrestling while they share a drink. And I felt that shot in Affliction just so beautifully captured the nature of that father-son relationship and the sickness of that father-son relationship, that when I came to thinking about this scene, I knew that I would have to end it with the same shot, to get the same kind of creepy feeling about this relationship that I had gotten about the father-son relationship in Affliction. I had to talk Greg into doing the dialogue while they were masturbating. At first, he wanted them to do the dialogue and then masturbate, and I said, no. The fun is that there's a total disconnect, and that you can be talking about the decor and while you're masturbating and think nothing of it. This is the shot I mentioned, my All-American Tableau.
My God, the building's on fire.
This excerpt from Beginner's Luck is from Beginner's Luck, and we repeat these few lines of dialogue. But you can see right now that from the first Beginner's Luck, the camera work is different, the lighting is different. It's going to be continually degraded, and we've now ratcheted up yet another level in how the style is starting to go to pieces. This handheld stuff is really kind of rocky. The colors are really icky in this room, and they're burnt out. The woman that I mentioned a little while back, I met her in Chicago, and she was a newscaster. And when she was a young 23-year-old pretty young thing in the news business, she interviewed Bob Crane. And she told me that, within minutes of the interview beginning, he had his hands all up and down her arms. And she said, when I saw that scene in the film, when he was touching that woman like that, it all came back to me, how absolutely creepy it was. And then he said, and when the interview was over, he got up and gave me what she called a totally inappropriate hug. So, and in that, his son Robert told me that he really felt that his dad only had one friend, and his only friend was John Carpenter. And one of the reasons that he didn't have many other male friends is exactly this inappropriate behavior. He had lost at some point a kind of censor or a governor, and he would come on to the wives and girlfriends of men right in their presence, which is sort of why I added that line for Dawson when he says he'd hit on the Virgin Mary with Jesus standing right there. Crane got very interested in editing. And just like the old radio days, and I used that to create these two little scenes that he does here. One, just to get the chicks laughing, and to show them these sort of comic videos. And then another one, which he, in a totally inappropriate way, shows the Carpenter, which portrays John, as a kind of a queen.
Just kind of laughing, and boom. I mean, they love sex. They're just looking for an excuse.
You want something to drink?
Women should have to have like a license or a letter from the Pope says, if I sleep with you, my boyfriend won't come after you. You know what I mean?
I talked to Nick Murphy in Houston.
Yeah, how'd that go?
Yeah, we're all set for Monday night with the swinging thing.
It's strange. Dallas is a great town for babes. But for swinging, nothing.
Well, it's a great city for dominance.
When he died, he was in the middle of editing a version of Saturday Night Fever for his son Scotty because he wanted to edit out all of the profanity. So, the contradictory and confusing nature of Bob's career as a film editor was certainly right there at the crime scene. Oh, that man there with a wig on is Pat Dollard. He's one of my producers. He's also Steve Soderbergh's manager.
Don't tell me funny. I know funny.
In this, upcoming bit of dialogue, you start hammering home on this kind of blithe way, you can use people and not get thrown by it because they always come back to be used some more. And so, here's Greg as Bob, completely kind of trashing Carpenter to his face and not thinking anything of it, and not thinking for a second he'll lose Carpenter's friendship or he'll have any consequences for his actions. And you just extrapolate from this kind of action all the way through to the way he treated women and the way he was just enabled by the culture. Now we're taking a big step down. We're starting to bleach bypass, and we're moving into the prosthetic. So we're in the final phase of the degradation of the film quality now. You see that Greg is much more jolly as a prosthetic, and this fellow serving him is named Bill Marinella, and he was one of my suppliers of the softcore girls. And he looked the type, and I cast him. There was in Vancouver, Canada, there was a cooking show, celebrity cooks or celebrity chefs, and Bob Crane appeared on it. The show was never aired, and apparently he sort of went off the rails and was talking about things like death and breasts. And so they didn't air the show, they just taped over it, and the tape doesn't exist. Well, I didn't play this quite as glum as it probably occurred in reality. I let Greg have a little more fun with it and, tried to keep the idea that he was losing his ability to control his behavior in public. And that these kinds of offensive things that he might say, it didn't bother him anymore. And he did say this in the theater or not. He would actually just refer to people, that big-breasted whore. Look at her. Go like that. So, so I used that. We came up with the balloon smuggler line for him here. I'm sure this is not how it went down up in Vancouver. But it's a mixture of things he was saying in the theater and in public, and so I just put this into the context of this cooking show, which did happen and in which he was in some way inappropriate. The scene after this is one of my favorites, and we're in this bleached area now. We're in the really burnt-out colors, and up now comes a continual music cue straight to the end, and isn't it, the stuff that Angelo really does when he's swirling around in those murky synthesizer waters. This was the first scene we did where Greg really had to do the difficult work, where he wasn't all glib, happy Bob. And I remember going to work that morning, because this was maybe the second or third weekend, and saying to myself, if Greg doesn't pull this off today, we're really fucked. And Greg and I had been talking about it, and, I felt quite sure he could pull it off, but still part of me wasn't quite sure, and I think part of Greg wasn't quite sure. And we were now shooting two camera all the time because it allowed us to get this kind of jerky editing. And about halfway through the morning, I caught his eye, and he caught mine, and I could tell from his look, and he could tell from my look that it was working, that he had pulled this off. And in fact, this scene not, one word is cut from the scene. It is played out to full length. Usually in a film, whatever you see in the final version is anywhere from 30 to 70% of what was shot, because there's just a natural shrinkage that occurs during the editing process. I love what Greg's doing here. This kind of, mood swings. And that's something we had discussed. He said, how to play this. And I said, he's hanging on here now, and he can't control it. And all of a sudden he goes up, and he's high, and then crashes again. And just the way that Greg was able to execute that whole sense of the mood swings of somebody who is becoming less and less certain of what their life, how their life is working, and this is also not very nice on Ron's part, getting the ambivalence of somebody who, one, doesn't want this person in his room, but two, is basically a decent sort. And I don't know why, but filmmakers who know agents very well are often the most guilty of portraying them in cartoonish, two-dimensional ways. So I really was intent on, trying to show this agent more or less like agents I know, which is, essentially kind of well-meaning and good-hearted, but also businessmen. So I was happy I was able to convey a more interesting agent than I usually see in the movies. And Ron had always done this knock-knock thing, knock on wood, and at the end of the scene, Greg picked up on it and does his little, right there, his little baby knock and echo. More and more in the film, I'm staying away from establishing shots now. I think that's the last one. This is the last one right there. Coming in close, staying close, and so you have less and less a sense of where you really are. And the reason I was doing that was to create this sense that all the days are swimming together now, and the boat is unanchored. This is usually the point in the film where most viewers say, wow, this movie really looks different now, because we've really, gone to the edge, and the skin tone is quite unattractive and green. The background is blowing out. A little later in this scene, Bob starts talking about the color orange, which is just a kind of delightful non sequitur that, more literal-minded people say, why is that in there? It's actually in there because Bobby, the oldest son, told me he had overheard this conversation in the last months of his father's life. His father telling this to someone else. Well, now this young actor here is playing Bobby, who you saw earlier as the Christian interviewer. Now he's playing him grown up as a UCLA student, and I'm putting these lines into Greg's mouth that Bobby heard his father say, about the color orange, I mean, there is a kind of vague point about the color orange, which is that, underneath it, I suppose he's trying to say, you don't really examine your behavior, and I haven't been examining my behavior. But he says it in such a disconnected, off-the-wall way that it's a way to sort of glance off the truth at an extreme angle.
Anne. No, don't hang up. What do you mean?
It's a precursor to him sort of really realizing that maybe he should sometime change his life. I'm not at all convinced that he was absolutely determined. He and Carpenter did have these fights at the end, and they were heard yelling at each other. And Crane had told people that he had to break it off with Carpenter. And he was having all this trouble with Patty because he might lose custody rights because he had showed Scotty porn, and that Scotty had been drawing dirty pictures. Oh, here's the little Apocalypse Now homage. The kind of surreal detail that pops out of nowhere that helps helps you get into a new zone for the end. But he had agreed to to see a counselor and all of this. On the other hand, he was telling people how excited he was, about new conquests, and his behavior was completely unmodulated or unmitigated. So it's not, you can't really say hard and fast that Bob Crane was about to change. His wife says he was, Patty does, and she said that he was going to get back together with her, but other people say no. He was happy that he was a free man again. Here's Willem doing the bunny dip as John Carpenter. It's the third bunny dip in the movie. There's one in Carpenter's apartment, and then Crane, when Carpy sets up the first VTR, Crane does a little bunny dip for John, and now John returns it back. This was a really wonderful performance by Greg, and this was a scene that was written for the daytime. We got there, it was raining. We went and found a garage and shot that garage instead. And then the rain started clearing up, but now it was dark. So I sat down and I rewrote the whole scene for night. I think it's a much better scene, much better. Than it would have been for day, And at the day, there were other people around the pool. It's much more to the point. It's kind of lonely, and these men are in a much more introspective mood. And I didn't have to deal with Greg's waistline. When I was shooting this at night, I thought to myself, why didn't you set it at night originally? It's such a better scene at night. So often these so-called bad things that happen to you while you're shooting, whether it be weather or somebody getting sick or some other incident that forces you to immediately go to plan B, they're not always a bad thing. This, I think, is... I think... Willem is a fabulous actor, and he really plays this kind of needy lackey. But Greg is really feeding him too. I think they're really in sync on this scene. It's two thoroughbreds, coming out of the gate together. This is another sort of little surreal thing to help change the tone of it at the end, to start to take you to a place where the world is not quite so literal, and where stranger things can happen, and you're getting out of that world which is being driven by porn, and into the world which is being driven by second thoughts and delusions and phantoms, and so it's been quite a while in the movie since there's been any nudity, and this whole last stretch there's no more nudity, almost no more color, everything's bleached out, wall-to-wall music, and finally you're in that other movie that you've been struggling to get into for an hour and a half. And it's the movie I like. I like this movie that I ended up with here at the end. Look at these ugly colors. Some people like the movie up front, the sort of Hogan's movie, but this is the movie I like. this was a little club in Scottsdale. Not this. This is actually a place in Los Angeles. But, toward the end, they had an argument in this club in Scottsdale. And I used that real-life event to base this scene on. Fred Murphy was the cameraman on this, and I really like Fred. I think he just did a terrific job, and would be very keen to work with him again. Not only in terms of this whole process of keeping the film changing and the lighting changing and the coloring changing, but also his sense of storytelling. When you have, you don't want a cinematographer just to make pretty pictures. You want him to somehow be involved in the storytelling process and have a sense of what is right for these characters now, both in terms of camera work and in terms of lighting. And so I think that Fred did a terrific job. Here's Carpenter again complaining about the video and how Betacam is putting him out of business. Right after this, we start for the first time going into ECUs, which I carry over into the scene following this. I've never been that big on ECUs. For me, a close-up is a headshot. But in this case, I decided to, because we were shooting 2-cam, to get those longer lenses on and do these shots right here, which create more a sense of energy and disconnected. Whenever you do ECUs, it's always kind of spooky because there's so much outside the frame that you're kind of confused as a viewer, wondering why there's so much you're not seeing and why are you seeing something so big. Maybe I might do more of them in the future. I think this is really the first time I did ECUs, and certainly the first time I did shaky cam. And we're into full-bore shaky cam here, too. The operator is intentionally moving the camera around when there's no justification for it. And in this scene, which is, Will just gets to go full bore and do what an actor can do. And I wrote this scene because I knew that this is how I should end the movie. Just let Willem do what he can do and let him play out this whole drama from his side and let him have the final dialogue scene. We originally started shooting this in a little more conventional way, but then kept going with longer and longer lenses, more and more oblique framing, more intentionally shaky camera, so that you're really getting mistakes. You're getting out of focus stuff, getting, so-called bad compositions. And then in the editing process, Chris Bowden, the editor, and I, really started emphasizing the mistakes so that you have repeated shots, you have jump cuts. You're just taking the language of film and throwing it on the floor and picking up the pieces at this point, which is, I guess, where you should be for the character of John Carpenter. Also, the music here, I imported a bunch of just kind of distorted sounds, animals squealing, ice breaking, metal twisting, and when we came to mix the film, I just played with these sounds on the mixing stage and added them to the score that Angelo had done, and so that I really could just, there's a whale, I think there's a whale sound in there. And a kind of Souls in Hell sound, and that. So we just did that on the spot. We mixed the film in Toronto. We did it up there. So, Willem gets to define the show here, and finally, it's his side of the drama. Greg and I were watching this, in the monitors, because Greg was on the phone to him during this, and it was just a delight to watch. This was all two-cam, side and front, Willem got concerned that we were going too far, but I told him I thought we were right there. We were doing it just right. And then you have this sort of weird coda where the mystery man, I didn't feel comfortable portraying Carpenter as a murderer, so we have a mystery man who enters. This is not Willem. This is just a stand-in. The clothes has no information in it. It's not clothes you associate with the Carpenter character. Crane was killed by a tripod. And that little boat, whoever killed him also wrapped an electric cord around his neck. The police theorized that he went into some kind of post-mortem convulsion, and that's why the killer did that. I depict it in here, although not. This is not Greg. This is a prosthetic. This is fake Greg, and a very, very good fake Greg. And the killer so wrapped this cord around his neck. I like narration a lot in movies, particularly if you have a lot of expositional things, because you can jump forward in time through narration. Plus, you really get to hear the voice of the person whose life you're following. You get to hear how they think and how they talk. And so I decided to let Bob finish up the show and wrap it up. At one point in the post-production, it was suggested to me that I rewrite this final narration to give the film a little more perspective, a clearer point of view and distance on Crane's life. And I said, no, I can't do that. I said, he never got it. He was always clueless. And just because he's dead, doesn't mean he gets it. He still doesn't get it. And so that was the intention of ending the film with those lines, about Carpenter. He was a cool guy in his way. That's how it is. Men got to have fun. So I guess that's... I'm out of film, and so out of things to say. Thank you.